tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, friends, seems that this that question box has a bottomless. It's bottomless. Keeps growing. That means your inquiring mind is inquiring more. So let's check out a few of these. Should our current level of mindfulness include all sensations and intentions? Anything else? Isn't that enough? If you included all the sensations and all the intentions, there wouldn't be any time for anything else. But I think you might miss a few here and there. The current level of mindfulness should include, as much as it can. So, that's true, because if you're unmindful, you won't be aware of anything. If you're mindful a little bit, you'll be aware of a little bit. If you're mindful a medium amount, you'll be aware of a medium amount. And if you're fully aware, then you'll be aware of a full amount. Because you can only be mindful as to how alert and focused the mind is. Because it's our distractions, and distracting thoughts and so on, and that doesn't allow us to be aware of so many things, only the things that really kind of grab us, and we become mindful of them. But especially in the beginning, the sensations that really grab the mind, those of course you need to pay specific attention to, so that you're able to let go of them and not be dragged into them, and to trigger off other types of thoughts and reactions. So in the beginning, probably, especially the unpleasant ones, because more suffering occurs probably because of our reaction to unpleasant, painful sensations than to the pleasant sensations. Although those do bring, like lust and desire and so on, but the negative ones tend to bring more kind of heavy type of results and reactions. But yes, in the development of mindfulness, to be aware of the intention behind an action, So the intention to lift your arm, or the intention to turn your head, the intention to do anything, even to blink. Normally you think blinking is an unconscious activity, and it is, because basically we are unconscious mostly. But even blinking, you blink because there's an irritation in your eye. And so you blink to try to get rid of it. But of course it's unconscious basically. We're not saying, oh, I'm going to blink right now. But if you're really, really mindful, you see, yes, there is. There is even an intention, a thought that I'm going to blink now. But it's very, very subtle, and only if you have very good awareness will you notice it. So too with so many other of our so-called unconscious body actions. They're only unconscious because our awareness is superficial. So the practice of developing mindfulness is actually a process of making what was previously unconscious, making it conscious. So that you can even be conscious of your breathing, whereas before you were unconscious of it. You can be aware of the blood pulsing in your veins, whereas before you were unconscious of it. You can consciously breathe into the bottom, the middle, and top of the lungs, whereas before you were unconscious of it. And in the same way, you can become conscious of the thoughts that arise in the back of the mind. When you develop your mindfulness and alertness, you can notice a thought come up into the mind the same way as you would, hear a sound. It would be that clear. But anyway, that's. But we have to start, kind of where we are. So first you start mindfulness of breathing. Just try to pay attention to that much. And then gradually open it up to feel parts of the body, sensations. And then gradually opening it. It all depends on the amount of your calmness and your concentration. They're in a direct proportion, a direct ratio. The more you are relaxed and concentrated, the more mindful and alert you will be, and the greater depths of subtlety that the awareness will take. So that's why any type of concentration that you do, concentration and mindfulness are not really antagonistic or different things. So whatever practice of concentration, like just watching the breath for a while and you switch to awareness, your awareness is going to be that much better. And when your awareness is that much better, when you go back to concentration, your concentration will be that much better. And when the concentration improves, you go back to awareness, and the awareness will be deeper and more sharp. So like that, the concentration and the awareness are mutually supportive and mutually help to strengthen each other. Anyway, the question says, anything else? Of course, the thoughts, just any besides sensations and intentions, any type of thoughts and emotions that arise, one should be, equally aware of that. That's called mindfulness of the mind. It's when you're getting angry, you can even make a note. Anger is arising now, or lust is arising now, or fear is arising now, or worry is arising now. To be able to, see clearly what type of thought is arising in the mind, because that will help get some detachment from it. And say, oh, yeah, it's just fear. Okay, so what? Okay, it's just desire. So what? And as you watch it, it disappears. That's the miracle of mindfulness. When you watch something, the mind can't be engaged in building it up. It's only when you lose that mindfulness and you start to identify with that particular thought, idea, emotion, or feeling that the hormones or adrenaline or other types of stuff get triggered off and get all tangled up into it. But when there's just that sort of self-observation, then that short circuits the reactive process. And that actually we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight, if I ever get through these questions. Some of these questions that we're not really focusing on right now, I'm not going to answer. Maybe I'll try to get them later on toward the end of the retreat. But some other questions that were not related to the practices that we're doing, I don't want to get into right now to put other thoughts into your mind. All these long questions. There's another napkin. I like these short questions. Where do emotions fit in the aggregates? That's what I was going to try to get around to next. Emotions belong to what happens after perception. So far we've covered the aggregate of the form or the sensory impulse, the sensory contact, and then the feelings that are generated by that, and then we recognize what those vibrations are. Call it a cat meowing, dog barking, plane going overhead, the teacher talking, and so on. And then you react to those. Once that memory of the object, identification of the object, then the mind goes back into his memory, and maybe fear will be triggered off because of the fear of dogs, or fear of the dark, or whatever, or lust, desire, well, the whole gamut of emotions. So those are part of what are called the reactions aggregate or sankhara aggregate. I'll try to talk more about them a little later. Actually, if there are only two possibilities of eye consciousness or pure awareness, then what shall we say about everyday absorption in a momentary experience? There is no eye consciousness, but it is not pure awareness either, it seems. Yeah, there's a lot of gray areas. And we talk about eye consciousness. There's many degrees of that because, when you're very emotional or something like that, and then the eye is very, very strong, then it's quite evident. But if you're relaxed and you're in a relaxation, or you're very relaxed, and then that sense of I and me is not so pronounced, but it's still there in a residual, level. It's just that, you're not. It's not prominent, and you maybe not be aware of it for short periods of time, or when you sleep. So, in the same way with the pure awareness, these again, awareness and consciousness. They're not like two different things, but consciousness is when it's dominated by the subject-object division and the self in relationship to objects out there. But when that division starts to fade away, and the feeling of self starts to fade away, then that consciousness gets more pure, or becomes what we call maybe pure awareness. But it's the same knowing faculty, but one is dominated by the sense of self and reactivity to things, whereas the other one is not. It's more open and spacious. Okay, so I mentioned, when I was a young monk, I was a gung-ho monk, hell-bent on nirvana. Can you say more about how you are different now? Now I'm an old monk. Is the difference related to your preference for Vipassana over Samadhi? It's probably when, I was a young monk, I didn't have a whole lot of awareness and wisdom. But as you grow older and you practice, that awareness and wisdom grows, and it becomes sufficient to tide you over and work with. And also it's, even like for you all probably in your practice, when you first hear about meditation, and you hear about enlightenment, and you read some of the texts, how a lot of these monks seem to attain enlightenment in 1 month or 3 months or, even 6 years. And so you think, oh, good. And so you strive and you go on some retreats and, you put forth a lot of effort. And then, you realize, maybe this will take a little longer than I thought. So you kind of mellow out a bit, So I suppose it's a little bit of all those things. How should one deal with the times when the conscious mind is very much in control, especially out of meditation? I guess when you're trying to control things. It feels like it makes it worse to try and stop it. Is it okay sometimes to recognize it's there and simply let it be? It's not a matter of the mind being in control or out of control. It's better for the mind to be in control, but not in a kind of a ego sense, but knowing what needs to be done. In light of the Dhamma and the light of the practice. And then, doing it. And of course you have to basically control your emotions, control your thoughts so they don't get out of hand, and be led around by your emotions and passions and impulses. That's being out of control. When you unmindfully react on an impulse, emotion, a feeling, without being mindful of it. That's when you're out of control. But when you mindfully respond to something, even if it's something that needs to be done, then you're in control. Such as even if you get a little bit upset, maybe somebody does something that irritates you. But it's, you want to offer some kind of constructive criticism or something, or constructive suggestions. And so you might then be mindful of what you're going to do and then offer some sort of advice or comments. Even the Buddha did. If you read the suttas, a lot of instances where the Buddha rebuked people in front of others and even called them fools. But he was very mindful of what he was doing, and he was doing it to help correct the person. And you see in the sutras where most of those times the person was corrected and eventually attained enlightenment. So anyway, when we notice our, whatever we're doing, whenever we start to do something, be mindful of it, and then you'll know when it's kind of over the top. When you're mindful, you'll be mindful when it's going a little bit too far, and you can say, okay, slow down, back off, it's enough. But ordinarily, you would just go with whatever your emotions are, angry and shout out tirades and just, not stop until you lose your voice or something else. So the mindfulness is always needed. Whenever we do something mindfully, then we'll be in control of the situation, and hopefully it will be the skillful way to deal with the situation. But if we're unmindful and we're just running on our emotions and adrenaline, then that's when it's likely to lead to some unskillful types of thoughts, actions, speech. What is that lantern-looking thing at the edge of the woods near the gong? It has a black thatched roof. It's a black thatched roof thing. That's all it is. And the mind should just leave it at that. Can an old habit of mind be fixed? Example, can't read that word. Tense bodily stiffness when a pain arises, although it's bearable. If a painful or irritating sensation cause aversion, should one change posture, conditioned to release the tension? I mean, the old habits of the mind can be changed, through mindfulness, and basically that's a main part of the practice. Is to change our unskillful negative states that cause us a lot of stress and problems into more mellow ones. Like, example, I changed my mind about avocados, so I didn't have to tell so many lies to my mother. I had finished my dinner. But other things like the painful feelings, when we can endure the painful feeling, we'll see that it's not that bad. It's doable. That itch is doable. It means in the beginning you just want to scratch and itch everything because that's just our habit. And so that adds, every time you do that, that adds stress to the nervous system. But in the mindfulness, if you can be mindful of these urges to want to, look and react and scratch and rub everything, you can be mindful of it and just give it a few seconds to play out, and it disappears by itself normally. And you see there's no need to react to it. And so you can conserve your energy. And in that way you kind of change your karma, as it were. That means you're changing the way that you react. So neurotically to things. There's more of a space in the mind and nervous system. And so, you know that you don't have to react to everything that goes on around you. Most of it's useless. So that is the way that we, change those karmic reactions, and to change the mind's way of doing business, at least with a lot of things. And with pain and sitting, the idea is not to torture yourself and just sit through excruciating pain, although sometimes you can try that, but is to gradually extend the threshold of tolerating the pain. But normally we just immediately try to get away from it and change it, even the smallest little thing. So you gradually increase the ability to tolerate it, little by little. So if you have a certain pain you're dealing with, the next time sit a minute longer before moving. And the next time sit a minute longer than that. And the next time sit a minute longer than that. And like that, then you will find yourself being able to then sit through that pain and discomfort, because most of the time those are not life-threatening types of pains or sensations. And many times they'll go away by itself. If you give it a few moments, that whatever irritation it is, whether it's a sound or a sensation, an itch, if you give it a few moments or a minute, they'll go away by themselves because they're impermanent. And so you don't have to expend energy to get rid of them, because they're going to go away anyway. Like the irritating sound outside. Rather than, you're trying to meditate and your neighbor's running his lawnmower and you're starting to get angry and, why is he doing that now? And I'm going to go tell him to, stop that. I'm meditating, and, you're thinking about that for 5 minutes, getting upset, and finally you get up and you go to the window to, shout out the window, and just before that he turns the lawnmower off. And so you created all this suffering in yourself for no reason. So like that, we can see that kind of thing happening a lot in our mind. So that's why the mindfulness helps to delay those reactions that could compound our problems, rather than in our rush to try to alleviate or rectify the problem. We're too much in a hurry. So forgive me if I didn't answer some of your questions. I'll try to get to them later, but otherwise I wouldn't have time to carry on the topic I wanted to. So, we're talking about the 5 aggregates. As I mentioned, the aggregate of form is this physical body, but also all the physical sense objects in the external world also that impinge on our senses. Visible objects, odors, flavors, sounds, pressures on the skin. And those produce the sensations or feelings. Actually, it's a sensation or vibration going through the nervous system, but it's felt as being something pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is before any thought occurs. It's kind of just a very basic gut instinctual reaction, but these are also acquired. And then we perceive it, we recognize it, because it's a vibration, and it works on memory. So just like in your computer, all the information in your computer is just a series of dots and dashes or something. But depending on that, then the word is it finds whatever data is there. and matches it up very quickly. I mean, you Google something in, some obscure little thing, and within 5 seconds pops out an answer. It's scoured the whole universe or whatever cyberspace. That quick. The mind works quicker. Our mind works quicker than that. Anyway, then once having perceived an object, then you remember that object, and it goes back again into the memory and says, when at a certain time a dog bit you. Now that's why you have fear of dogs, or a certain type of dog, or a certain type of person. Or you were attacked in the dark, even in a past life. Now you're scared of the dark. Or you fell off a roof one time. You're scared of heights. Or you were, any number of things that could have happened to you in the past. The mind remembers those things, and those become the memories and the potential for reacting in the same way. So they're called sankharas. So the fourth of the aggregate is called the sankhara, the group of sankharas. And it's a very large group. It's the largest of all the aggregates. But to keep it simple, sometimes I just call it the reactions, because that's the immediate thing that we notice. It's the way we react. Once we recognize a thing, we react to it. With either, aversion, attachment, or just, a neutral reaction. But it's based on the feelings. So the unpleasant feeling will be, the perception that will be arising as an unpleasant object, such as my avocado. So I perceive the avocado to be something unpleasant. And then the reaction about letting the cat in the house so you can eat him. So that would be a sankhara, a habit. Every time if I heard we're having avocados for dinner, we'll let the cat in. So that's just a simple example. Or the sankhara of, the kind of chills going up the spine, or the gagging when you eat some food. Or every time you see something you don't like, you kind of turn away and so on. So these are just the habit formations. We've accumulated them our whole life. And not all of them are bad, but many of them do limit us and are, considered, negative or unskillful, because it leads us to accumulating a lot of unnecessary stress, tension, worry, anxiety, and fear. And so it's these sankharas really that are the main karma. They're the result of past karma, and they're also the source from which you create the new present karma. So every time you repeat a certain habit, that kind of puts another etch in our nervous system, so to speak, and to make it happen again the same way the next time the same impression comes to us. And so with mindfulness, to be mindful of the intention, that's why the mindfulness of the intention is important. Because we don't see the intention most of the time. We just speak, act, react without being mindful of the intention. And it's just a knee-jerk reaction. The Pavlov dog's kind of reaction. You hear the bell in the mountain, the dog salivates. And so that's how we get locked into the cycle of karmic repetition, repeating the same kind of habits over and over again. and even they become unconscious. And this actually brings up another point. I wanted to contrast this with part of the Paticca Samuppada, which is the Buddha's doctrine of conditional arising, or the nature of how things arise and pass away, and also the nature of rebirth, and the nature of how the ego is strengthened. How many have heard of the 12 links of dependent origination? You know, the kind of cornerstone of the Buddhist teaching. I'm not going to go into all that right now, but there's the 5 middle parts of that. State that, we have this body. Well, briefly I'll just go through it as a background. Because of ignorance, not knowing the truth, we get involved in all kinds of karmic activities. And so the sankharas are there created in the mind because of ignorance. And because of the past, our mind is full of these sankharas. And these sankharas have given rise to this body, the birth. This body was born. We have this mind and body. And we have the 6 senses, and then we have contact with the world. Because of contact, feeling arises. Because of feeling, craving arises. Because of craving, grasping arises. Because of grasping, becoming arises. Because of the becoming, the birth arises. And when you're born, suffering and death, and the whole range of suffering and old age and death also arises. But especially in terms of the mind and moment to moment, each time, we have a sense impingement. So we have contact. A sound hits the ear. That's called contact. Or a visible image hits the eye. Or an odor hits the nose. Flavor touches the tongue. Something touches the body. That's called contact. And that produces the feeling. That feeling arises. That pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling arises. And then we have desire arises because of that. Craving. Craving for the feeling or craving to be away from the feeling. There's kind of, there's positive craving and negative craving. Positive craving is to want to have and hold on to something. Negative craving is to get away from it. And that's the initial impulse. Or the initial thought. Now, if we have mindfulness and we can be aware of desire, aversion, and just look at it, then oftentimes that might drop out of the mind. By just objectively knowing that we're having aversion or desire, if your mindfulness is strong enough, those thoughts could disappear out of the mind. But if you're unmindful, that craving turns into grasping. And grasping is the mind's continued thinking about the object. Yes, I have to have it. My life depends on it. I'm going to die if this happens. Or so many things. But basically it means the continued thinking about it. Worrying about it. Planning, scheming. How can I get that object? How can I meet that person? Scheme and plan. That's the mind grasping after that initial object. And then when it builds up to a climax, then you have to take action on it. It means you decide to do something, and then it comes to the point where you can actually do it or not do it. And if you have mindfulness, even up to that very last second, if your mindfulness kicks in, you say, no, let me not do that. Like tell a lie or kill a mosquito or itch or whatever else. But once you do the action, that's the karma. And once you've actually done the deliberate action, you can't take it back because the memory is there. And you've strengthened the ego again. So the action is called becoming. So you have the initial craving, which is the initial thought to want to do something. Like you have a painful feeling and the thought to change your posture comes into the mind. But if you have good mindfulness, you say, well, no, maybe I'll wait. I'll endure this pain. And so you don't change the posture. And so enduring the pain, maybe the pain would just go away by itself. But had you not, decided to endure it and you just change the posture, then that's the becoming. That means you strengthen that habit of aversion so that, I don't like that pain. And you strengthen the sense of I. Because I got rid of that pain. Now I am more peaceful. So the ego is strengthened. Every time that you deliberately do an action, whether it's an action that gets something, I got it. Or I got away from it. The I is strengthened. So that's called birth. That means the I is born again. And the action is the becoming, because it becomes a stronger habit. Becomes in the future. That's why the term becoming. Because of the accumulation of the habit, it will repeat itself. It will continue to repeat itself in the future. And then also meaning it'll be born again in the future. The habit will be born again, or the thought will be born again. And then when it's born again, then you have to suffer again on account of it. So that process, the contact, craving, grasping, becoming, and birth, that whole process happens with each moment of sensory impingement. But of course it happens so quickly, we're not really kind of aware of it. Of course, sometimes it's more pronounced and evident, but other times it's not so pronounced. Or all of those stages might not be evident in there. But certainly with something like a pain or an itch, you can observe. It's easy to observe that whole process. Next time you have a pain or itch or discomfort, or let's say a noise disturbed you or something, you can just be, okay, that was contact. The sound hitting the ear, or the recognition of that pain, the contact. And the feeling, of course, is there simultaneously. Okay, it's a painful feeling. Then you can see a slight desire to get away from it. You can see that kind of aversion. So that's the craving. But if your mindfulness is good, maybe you can ignore it. You pay attention to something else. Or maybe a bird starts chirping and, oh, what a nice little birdie, and you forget about your pain temporarily. And the bird stops chirping and then the pain again. So the initial aversion to the pain is there. But then you can see the mind start worrying about it. If I don't change my posture, I might get crippled, I might get gangrene, or any number of things, or just the kind of the struggling with it. That's the kind of the grasping. Or making excuses why you should move. Well, I've already sat for 45 minutes, I've done enough for today, or whatever might come into your mind. But then anyway, then it comes to the decision. Are you going to move or not? And then it comes to that point, if you decide to move, then it may not be that bad, or you can decide not to move. But if you decide not to move and you increase your ability to, your tolerance level to sit through longer and longer pain, then that'll probably be of more benefit. Because then when you reach that same level again, you're apt to then move again and again, and you become continually harassed by pain. And so the suffering is also reborn again, because you will suffer again in the same way the next time. But if you extend the ability to endure discomfort, and not only physical, but even discomfort of unpleasant sounds or smells or tastes, then the same process is working. Your suffering will decrease. But what's crucial in our mindfulness, the crucial point is, you can't do anything about contact, and you can't do anything about feeling, and you really can't do much about perception. Those are going to arise automatically because of past karma. And even craving, you can't really do too much about craving and aversion in the beginning. But where craving turns into grasping, that's where your main practice of mindfulness can kick in. The two stages where craving turns into grasping and grasping turns into becoming. Those are the two links, the vital links, where your mindfulness should be mostly aware. Don't worry about craving so much. We always hear about give up desire, give up desire. Eradicate all craving. You're not going to. Not until you attain the state of anagami, which is, for most of you, probably a long ways away. So don't worry about that too much. But because craving in itself really can't hurt you. It's the grasping, the worrying, the planning, the scheming about, getting what you want or trying to get away from this unpleasant thing. Because that's going to lead up to the becoming, the actual doing of the karma. So, that's why when you pay mindfulness to the feelings, and you can be aware of that, the painful or pleasant feeling, then you can see that subtle or initial kind of desire arise. And then you can muster up your right understanding, your investigation of Dhamma, and see if this is really going to be necessary or useful. And then you can either let go of it, or you can see if you don't have very strong mindfulness, or then you can see the mind starting to, worry, grasp it. Then you can, this is grasping, and then you try to release that, grip. So, like if a dog came up and barked at you, that would be, the initial, kind of like craving. But then he, bites into your pant leg or something, holds on. That's his grasping at it. So that's what our mind does. Our mind grasps onto a certain idea, a certain feeling, and doesn't want to let go of it, and then it causes us, suffering. And we take some action based onto it. And then you can see where that grasping builds up to that point of decision making. Are you going to scratch or not scratch? Are you going to move or not move? Are you going to turn your head or not turn your head? Or whatever it might be. You have up to that last minute, that's your last minute chance. Even though you went through the grasping and the worrying and everything still, but you haven't committed the actual karma yet. At least of the speech or the bodily action. And so you have a last minute chance to reason it out and decide, no, I don't need to do this. And then back off of it. Or you can do it. So these are the key points, or the key moments when we should really have our mindfulness and understanding ready. And especially out in your daily life. Because things are happening all the time, unexpected things in a daily life. And we don't have a lot of time to, make decisions. And so we need to have a good degree of mindfulness and awareness with us so that when things happen unexpectedly, we'll be able to, avoid overreacting and repeating our unnecessary neurotic kind of habits of thought, worry, and other emotional things in our karmic actions. But that's why the intention, the awareness of intention is really key, because that intention is the karma. You see that intention, okay, now I'm going to do this. And that's the time when you can either do it or not to do it. But see, the intention arises at a very subtle level. It arises from what I call the cellular level. Normally we're not aware of our intentions until after the fact. Or we're aware in a very vague way. Okay, we might know we're going to itch, for example, but we weren't really aware of that first moment of lifting the arm. We weren't aware of that first impulse of lifting. It is shot by us. So by developing that awareness of intention, then these intentions will then, once you've developed it, of course, they'll arise in the back of the mind even before you've done that thing. It'll arise out, like just loom out in the mind as an intention and almost like shock you. You see it. So you can, but unless you're grounded and you're in touch with the body, you won't be able to see those intentions very clearly. Because again, those intentions are arising basically, it's the impulses and electrical energy that's moving from our brain to our motor control units and everything, and controlling all these impulses and thoughts. So when we're more relaxed and grounded, we can much more easily remain in touch with them and see them. So that sankhara khanda, the aggregate of sankharas, comprise those intentions, because all the sankharas are preceded by intention. And it is the intention to think. Normally we're lost in thought, we don't even know we're thinking, but if you're real mindful, you can actually see the intention to actually think about something. So an intention precedes everything. That's why there is the Dhamma Talk verse. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master, mind is their maker. Act or speak with an impure state of mind, and suffering will follow. act or speak with a pure state of mind, then happiness will follow. So what it means is that all actions are led by the mind, means led by intention. And of course led by our previously accumulated karmic habits and the ignorance that we have. But it's really, it's led by the intention. Although we do things unconsciously too. There's a lot of unconscious things we do that there's no... that's because the intention is just buried so deep down underneath our layers of ignorance and cloudy mind that we have no way of seeing it. So the mindfulness practice again is about revealing what was hidden and making what was previously unconscious, making it more accessible to the conscious mind. But it simply means we have lowered our threshold of awareness to be aware of subtler things. It's not like you have two minds. There's not an unconscious mind and a conscious mind, like two different boxes. It's just a kind of a gray kind of invisible line. Unconscious means simply anything we're not conscious of. Our motives, intentions, repressed desires, or whatever it may be. But when you develop your mindfulness, then it's just that you've lowered your threshold of awareness, and now you're picking up on these subtler vibrations and thoughts and so on, which were always there. It's just that they were covered over by a neurotic, external oriented mind. So in the, as the Vipassana practice, improves, again, that's what the Vipassana means. It means seeing reality as it is. And what is reality as it is? It's this process of feeling, perception, volition, and the habits that keep on just repeating themselves over and over because we're mindful. And of course there's deeper realities about the nature of the self and the ego consciousness, which I'll talk about perhaps tomorrow in the last aggregate, although I've already mentioned something about that. But especially the how there's a feeling, and the feeling produces this urge, or the initial craving and desire, and we go on thinking about it, and then that leads to the actual action. So to observe that process, when you observe that process, then you gain your own insight, and you realize that, that is the way it's happening. And you'll be in a better position then to change your habits. Habits are so difficult to change, aren't they? And people try all kinds of things to change their habits. Extreme measures. I knew one person who had the craving for food, so they wired their teeth shut. Went to a dentist and had their teeth wired shut so they couldn't eat. But then they would find an opening in their teeth and suck malted milk through the teeth. Or these other, extreme measures, or of course, pills and all these things that people are trying to overcome their habits. Shock therapies, drugs, and so many things. make resolutions. I'm going to do this, But most of the time they fail. Because people are trying to manipulate from the outside. When these habits, their source is on the inside. The source is coming from basically the unconscious, or the cellular level. And so you can't change that from manipulating the outside. I mean, you can sometimes do some good, but you haven't tackled the source of it, the underlying reason why it arose in the first place. Like, eating disorder or any other types of obsessive kind of things. So the practice of the mindfulness is to, the Buddha's approach was to, go into the source and make the changes there at the source rather than trying to just force changes from outside. And so this practice of the path of mindfulness is that process of reaching the source, which is basically intention. And then using one's wisdom and skill and the other aspects of the Buddha's teaching on transformation to aid that process of being able to transform our negative and reactive, neurotic type of thoughts, speech and reactions that bring us suffering into more mellow, mindful, purposeful, relaxed responses that enable us to live in harmony with the world around us and not create waves and to create more karmic entanglements that just bring all kind of problems. This is why just, the practice of concentration is not enough. If a person just wants to practice concentration and just practice watching the breath in order to kind of calm the mind down and to kind of feel comfortable and have a little peace of mind, but then if it only stops there, then you haven't really transformed much. And when you come out of that concentration, the mind will very quickly come back to its ordinary level. So the real transformation comes from developing that awareness that can see these unwholesome habits and learn to change them there at the source through mindful behavior and abandoning the unskillful negative states and cultivating the skillful positive states. So I think that might be this much for tonight.